got one more, and then the last kind of pattern. So my two favorite streamers on the Grand, if I'm fishing a streamer kind of downstream, walking down on a floating line and targeting, especially in skinny water, it's hard to beat a Thundercreek. So if I say Thundercreek Minnow, does anybody, I think most people know what I'm talking about. The Dace version of a Thundercreek, I'm not going to tie it, is deadly. I mean, it is absolutely, I don't know what it is, durable. I can use the same pattern over and over. But that the one thing I don't like about fishing streamers downstream anymore is you're fishing them downstream. And so I've really switched my streamer fishing over the last couple of years. And I would say this fly caught more fish on the Grand almost than everything combined. So even when it was tough, we would turn fish. I think it was how we fished it. So I've seen this online recently called a crinkle streamer or something. It's a sparkler. So if I say sparkler, right? So a sparkler with on a jig hook. And there's a couple things going on with this fly. I'll show you how to tie it super fast, but there's a lot to be. This is where one I say, get a jig hook. You know, see how it's got a big 4mm bead on it and a big jig hook. I tied this ahead of time because I'm taking this with the credit tomorrow because I'm going to thump a big brown on this. Works really good for steelhead. I love it. I'll talk about how to fish it, but man, is it a good pattern. I mean, the sparkler pattern has been around for ages. It's a very famous UK Stillwater pattern. I've been fishing a sparkler for forever, taught by, again, not to talk about Ian the whole time, but he taught me that a long time ago. But this way of fishing it works even better. The pattern hasn't changed much. But so jig hook in the vise, this one we might be able to see, 4mm bead. So I purposely want this really, really heavy. That's you know, I'm not here to make monster casts with it, but I do want it to sink pretty fast. And I want, the reason I'm gone with the heavy jig head is I actually want the motion like this. Like I want it to rise and fall like crazy. It allows me to do things on the Grand and really pick up fish that, you know, stripping a streamer like normally across the top of them won't always bring them up, especially when they're off. You can really do well with this. So thread base. So, I mean, my buddy Dave Downey, I'm using his stuff. I'm not plugging his stuff. This is just gold. He calls it razor flash, but it's just gold. What do you call it? Flashaboo, something like that. And then this is gold and silver. I did it opposite, but I like the crinkly version, not that Christmas tinsel-y looking one, the one where it's got some crinkle to it, like somebody crunched it up. So get the two colors that are kind of crinkly. All right. Oh, I shall just take a long piece. I was already tying them, so there's a big long piece. I would cut the whole piece, and I wet it. Leave the tail as long as you want. We're gonna fold this over, so you want about hook length and a half over the edge of the hook. So I tie in like this. Tie in the tail like that. Don't worry about how long the tail is. If it was this long, I'd leave it on because later we'll cut it and you just reuse it. So you can get about 3 flies out of one big piece. So long tail there. This part is going to fold back. Keep in mind the fly is going to fish the other way. This would be kind of the bottom of the quote unquote minnow. So I pull this back. I can't be bothered to wind all the way up. I hold this tight. Latch it down. Already wants to fold over, so it looks like that. Pull this back. Whoops. Don't pull it. Make sure you secure your thread in front before you pull it back. Pull this back and tie off. No, just kidding. So you end up with that. We're almost done. I know, takes forever. So then you take a gold piece, same, right? This is where we'll take the length the other way. So you want it slightly longer. I'm not going to tie it. I just take it and I squish it through the hook. Slightly longer than that silver piece. Pinch. Catch it. Oop, catch it. So I catch it in. So I've got my gold caught in like that. A couple thread wraps in front. I'm just going to pull this back like that, very, very carefully so I don't eat the hook, which I've ate twice, and wrap it down. That is the sparkler, or the crinkle thing. So we'll just give it a bit of a trim. I actually might not even trim this one. I have no problems with it being this size. You can I would say leave it long because you can always trim it smaller. You can have them in different lengths. I might trim this a little bit. So take your gold. So that's a little long. So I'm just going to trim the wing to a reasonable length, trim the back. There we go. There. So that's just a jig sparkler. But so that in the water will move like this. It catches a ton of light. But the way I fish it, because that's a 4 mil bead, well, so you can fish it off a Euro rig, which is great, but you don't need a Euro rig for it. But you can, if you take your fly rod and you put a longer leader on it, you're not trying to cast the whole fly line. What you want to do is kind of high stick it through pockets. So first of all, I'll dead drift it first. So you can do a fast stretch of water or something like that. I will bounce this just through. And so it just comes bouncing. So this is kind of bouncing down at their level. You'll be amazed how many you pick up. Then you just take your rod, flip it the other way, and just jig it like this. So it goes bounce, 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 and just goes, and then starts jigging up in the current. You can hold this fly in some of those pockets in the Grand and just boop, 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 cork. And if I want to make a long cast with it, go over it, strip it across the current. It'll go like this. This fly will just cover your bases to the point where I've kind of just stopped using many other streamers and just kind of fish that. Like that sucker right there. Now there's times it's a little flashy, but I tell you, if you can't catch a fish and you need to turn one on the Grand, and the little guys love it too, but the big guys will crush it. Steelhead too. If you're fishing the Saugeen, put that through anywhere, especially if you get new fish coming up, you'll get browns and steelhead all day on it.
Ian?
Yeah.
Just a question about just in general. If you start looking at the flies you use now and what you used maybe 5 years ago and 10 years ago, has there been like an evolution where you've weeded them out and now because you're fishing differently, you have narrowed this down?
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of trial and error. I'll quote what somebody told me once. You'll start with a pheasant tail and a hare's ear. You're going a big circle, and you'll end up with a pheasant tail and a hare's ear. And so I think everybody who nods has fished for a long time. I think the only thing I use less flies, more around how they fish, and then focusing on my fishing, less the fly, but the same fly in multiple sizes. So I like the pink bead hare's ear in a 14, 16 to 14 and a 12. You know, I like my pheasant tails and all, but it'd be the same fly. And I more will fundamentally change the fly versus, ooh, this one's got a little bit of dubbing on it or something like that. I make more, I think, Brian, I make more wholesale changes to try it. Like I'll change the size versus, you know, gee, I'm not sure it had that shade. I think I was pretty hung up on some of the minutia stuff. But I know these flies will work. I actually pay less and less attention to what's actually happening from a hatch perspective. If you want to know my sequences, like now, I'll usually, if I say T-colored, I start with that. We'll eat it. Nope. We'll eat this. Nope. Okay, it's going to be a tough day. I'll throw the pheasant tail through there. Okay, nope. Now I'll try the ultra small, the ultra big, but very rarely will you go through a stretch where one of those three patterns won't work. And then I'll just am I in the right spot? Try moving the fly, dead drift it. I've fished nymphs as streamers, so just cast them out, strip them across the pool. Dead drift. Just try anything to get them to eat.
Ian, do you have a favorite midge fly apart from the zebra midge?
That little
zebra midge you showed earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I like a brass ass from Ian if I'm fishing one with no weight.
What about more of a dry fly, like a midge cluster? Do you ever use that?
Like the Griffiths gnats and stuff like that. Yeah, not really. They're deadly. I should probably use them more. I do have one. I'll show you my favorite midge. You're gonna get mad at me though. Okay, here you go. In the bonus section, I'll show you my favorite midge. So I've been fishing. Where's Joe? Up at the Franklin Club there. You know, the top pond. Those fish are being really difficult eating these tiny stuff in the film. This fly, if they're on midges, now I'm tying this on a 14. I'd probably, what is this, a 16? 14 or 16.
There, I don't hear him.
What's that?
Is Joe on? I don't hear him.
Yep.
All right. So I'll take big surprise. Here's your number one. Bigger surprise. You guys can't believe it. CDC. So I'll just take a couple pieces of CDC. So I'm using my my dubbing blenders I take with me everywhere. So I take some of that, go like this. So it's like it's almost like a hare's ear Griffith gnat, but if you look at that dubbing, it's got CDC in it. It's like, and you see the antron in it. Then I take it and I dub it really. So it's, you know, Griffith's gnat would be, you know, almost like that midge cluster you talked about. I'm doing the same thing with this. I just tie it loose. Now I'm tying a bigger version of it. And then I brush the crap out of it.
Well, that's the same as a crane fly pattern, really, as well, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. Possibly. They love it. So, you know, if fish are really, I'll tell you the story on this one. Usually it ends up with us being awe-inspired by some Spanish angler showing us something. So we were in a competition internationally. It was one of those situations that you knew they were eating midges. They would not touch anything, couldn't catch them. Of course, our coach walks by and just destroys them with that. If you see that up close, you know, it almost looks like a Griffith's gnat, right? It just doesn't, you know, the other one would have grizzly hackle through it. This just has, it's very, very sparse.
Yep.
You just dub up you put the powder on the top. That sits in the film. It is the go-to when, you know, they're sipping midges, you can't catch them. Griffith's gnat's a great choice in that situation. I've been doing exceptionally well. Also on lakes, like when they get on, the same thing, they eat the little midges up in the top. This is my first try if they won't eat anything else. They call it, I'll swear now, they call it the shit fly in Spanish. You know, when they're eating small shit in the surface. That's what they're talking about, right? So, well, you can tie this right down to a 20, right? So, but they're very rarely will a trout not eat that. But that's my version of a little mini midge.
Wonderful.
Yeah, actually, good point. That woodfish almost looks like a crumpled crane fly. And my joke is when I catch a fish, what do you think he took it as? I ask the fish and I'm like, he's not talking. So they never tell me what they ate. They just ate it. But that's a pretty good idea, actually. That little bit of CDC makes the difference. So don't just dub the hare's ear on. Don't go overboard. Just blend it with your hands. A little bit of hare's ear, a little bit of CDC, brush it out. It's not the best floating fly in the world. I don't think that's a bad thing. It sits right in the film, and it is tough to see. You know, it's not the greatest pattern to see in the world, but you know, if a fish rises near that, just lift. It's a pretty good one. One little trick on the Grand, it isn't tiny right now, but if you fish spinners, when you get into the like July timeframe, where you have the evening hatches coming off, or even, you know, the Hendricksons in May and stuff like that, a great early morning pattern as a search pattern is a Mayfly Spinner. So a lot of people, you know, I remind myself to not always just throw a caddis first thing in the morning, and you know there's been hatches in the evening. They're conditioned to seeing spinners. They almost went to bed eating spinners. They're still kind of around. You'd be amazed what you can do with like a Hendrickson spinner first thing in the morning on the Grand. So I didn't tie one. I tie them all in black. You can guess how complex my spinner would be. Take your favorite spinner pattern. It'll work. That's a good one to remember. A little tip on any river where, you know, not great this right now, but when we're just coming out of, when you have those evening hatches and you're fishing early in the morning because the water temps are the only good times, that's a great one to start with. I would say like a couple things like just from is work your flies, have confidence in them. You know, the same fly you have confidence in different sizes, different bead weights, stuff like that. Think about how the fly fishes. I can't state that enough. How is your fly actually moving in the water? I'm convinced it's half the reason how the fly moves. And these are the ones I mean, but I'll guarantee you, without a doubt, the first fly I tie on tomorrow will be that, the pink bead waltz worm. Just because the credit is clear.
Sorry. I can't remember correctly, but I think up in the Franklin Club, there's a little frame there, and there's 3 flies you use during the 2016 Commonwealth Games. One was the pink beard's hare's ear, and the other was the sparkler, right?
Mini sparkler, yeah.
Mini
like
sparkler.
It was for lake fishing. It was about probably like that big, like that big.
Yes, a smaller version of it.
And the last one was for those who like cat's whisker booby, for those who, they like lake flies. But yeah, that's actually, that's, as I say to my daughter, that's good remembering, Brian. That's good remembering. Yeah, that's true.
I was thinking about it today because I was tying them in some fat arse blobs and some other ones. So.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's one final one. We've got a couple of minutes as a drone stone. Anybody heard of a drone stone before? This is less of a grand river. Anybody here fish the credit regularly?
Yep.
So this
fork.
This is the fly.
At the forks at the top end?
Yeah. This is the one. This is the one. Pay attention. I didn't know who said that, but I didn't mean to be rude. Pay attention. This is so Chris from Drift. So no joke. I did a series with Drift, and just similar guide flies. So big surprise, they're similar because I didn't change them this season. But I put this one in there, and he had a client of mine ask him to tie them for him, and so he'd been fishing them, and he cleans up on the Grand. I just had a client write me. Actually, you would know. I've been taking Marco and his wife out. For those who know Marco, he just in the credit with this drone stone. I gave him a bunch. It's a really good one at the fork. So I don't know the credit that well. I don't know if you have stoneflies up there. I have done very, very well on the Grand with this too, but I think they eat it as a crayfish. I know there's mini stones, so it's a pretty good pattern as a crayfish as well. It's really, really basic stuff. So 12 or a 10, I put it on a jig hook, and I have a big bead on it. The reason being it has rubber legs. So, you know, it takes a lot to push through the water to get down. And a lot of times when we're fishing stoneflies and stuff like that, it's fast water. So I tend to weight these pretty heavy because they catch a lot of water. This is really, really basic, but there's I'm convinced a big chunk of it is the actual dubbing. This would be one where it just seems to work better. So this is I'll put this in the notes, but copper bead. I'm not sure it's the bead color. I mean, we're putting rubber legs on it, stuff like that. Size 12 seems to be really, really nice. You can go size 10. I wouldn't go much smaller. 10s and 12s. I would have any legs if I was tying some. So these little barred, they're olive barred legs, rubber legs. All right. So I tie rubber legs in like this. I fold them over. I don't know. You guys are all better tires and show me something to do on a tying night. But I just fold them in half, and then I just put it in the back. I tie it on. So because I had a horrible, in one competition, had to tie like 100 of these for the team, and I figured out how to tie them pretty quick. So there's the legs in at the back. You want to trim about the length of the fly. Don't go overboard with the legs. I mean, don't worry if they're offset. Nobody cares. Maybe you care, but the fish doesn't care. This is the kind of secret. You can tie it hare's ear and it's okay. This ice velvet olive brown. And it's this weird purpley, I don't know if you can see that, kind of weird glinty purpley, but I don't know what it is with that color. This fly fish is way better. It must change some kind of color in the water. If you're fishing on the credit, this is the one. But you know, so kind of you can see it. It's got this translucent-y, sparkly thing to it. But yeah, so that's ice dub olive brown by hairline. So, I mean, you can tie in many others. I just tie them in this now, after hare's ear being my second. But so, pull the legs back. I just dub the body into the midpoint. If you were wondering, is he going to put more legs? You would be correct. So I just take one of the legs, and all I'm doing is putting a leg in the middle. So you go over the leg once, twice, like that, once in front. For those who hate tying rubber legs like I do. So we've got 2 legs. Clean that up later. More dubbing. So again, this is a fly. You lose these like crazy. So if you start falling in love with how pretty they need to be, go for it. But this, you're fishing around rocks, you're putting it in where stoneflies live and crayfish and bouncing it on the bottom. Just be prepared. Don't fall in love with one of these, or kiss it goodbye. You're gonna lose it for sure. Then I take another set of legs, fold it in the middle, face it the other way. So I just face it up the front, tie them over. There's many ways to tie legs. This is just the way I found is fastest.
Well, this ends up with 6 legs on each side?
6 legs total.
Yeah. Oh, 6 legs, 3 on each side.
Yeah, 3 on each. So I fold it. Oh, yeah. So I do them at the same time. But if you have a better way that you like to tie legs, that's just the way I do it. So it kind of looks like that. I've got one like mutant leg over here. I just found this is faster, because find your fastest way to tie it. It's just really a rubbery leg fly, and then a little bit in the front. I'm going to fish this at the forks hopefully tomorrow and see what happens. I'm feeling pretty comfortable with the whole thing. So I don't get hung up on if my legs are perfect, couldn't care less. They're going to wiggle down there. It's going to bounce off the bottom. I give up if a fish with an IQ of 3 is that picky on if my legs are off. But so that is the drone stone. So it's just a rubber leg brown nymph. But there you go.
Yep.
Pretty cool, right?
Yep.
That thing that's the credit killer right there. Nothing really. It's just like a dubbed nymph with rubber legs, but it works a treat.
Very good.
Not really on the Grand, but everywhere else. It's okay on the Grand. It's not like it won't work, but it's not one I would be running for. But I definitely will on the credit, and that's based on everybody who fishes this on the credit keeps writing me of how well it works. So that's a few nymphs. That'll keep you out of trouble. Any other things I can answer? I kind of like that's about all I got. Outside of showing you guys, I'm happy to answer typic question, leader question.
Hey, Ian, I've got a question for you. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not.
Yep.
Yep. So sometimes when I fish CDC dry flies or CDC and hair fur dry flies, they seem to sit like they don't. I fish a lot of broken fast water. They don't sit well in the water. They almost fall and become a wet fly right away. So are you fishing those CDC flies like on slower water?
No, fast too.
Fast too.
Are you putting like the powder on it?
I usually don't put anything. I usually just press my flies in like a napkin and then throw it.
I would get that loon top ride or frog stanny, or get the powder for sure.
So and it's supposed to sit on top like the CDC and hair fly should still sit propped up like a dry fly. Yeah.
So I have my vest in the car. I'm trying to think.
I've seen the shakers before.
But I was gonna say, where do I have one on here? No. So what I do is I can demonstrate it. I would get the big ones, like the loon. I'm saying loon not for any reason beyond I like the loon shaker. I would put it on your vest so it sits up, like there's actually holders for it.
Okay.
I don't like the brushes, so if I take I'm constantly putting that powder on it, right? So if I grab it like this, and I got to take a little thing out of my vest and brush it on, it's blowing all over the place. That stuff dries the crap out of your hands too. So you don't want it on your hands. It takes all the moisture out of it. So stick it. I'm right-handed, so I put it here on my vest. It sits right here. I can just pop the lid, dip my pinky in only, and I hold my fly like this, and you're fishing. So as soon as your fly drowns, pick it up, boom, cast. No need to dry it. I see people who use elastics. Have you seen the elastic
Yeah, I
ones?
see that they go like to sort of tweak it, like like a banjo.
They pull it and they
Yeah.
just don't do it. Just do this. It's in one cast and it's dry. It'll land perfect. It will sink once in a while. Also, don't use fluoro in your dry fly leader.
Okay.
So the couple things I would say, if I go dry fly fishing, a couple things I like to do is rig up my leader, my line. I'll actually hook it on a tree or something, put the hook on it and lay my line out. Like I'll actually walk back so my line is actually just lying on the grass. I'll take gink or what's called mucilin, like a silicone paste, put that up 20 feet of your fly line and the top part of your leader. So I don't want never do I want my fly line not floating with a dry fly. I'm like obsessed with it because couple reasons. If my fly line is sinking, it's causing more drag. If it sits up on the water, it drags less. When I lift the fly out of the water, especially in fast water, it's dunking it. Right? So I don't want it to dunk it. But what you don't want to do is put that all the way to your fly. So just the first, you don't take it right to the fly because you don't want it really like a cable sitting up there. The other play, when you're picking up the fly, do a roll pickup. So I'm casting here, if I just pick it up, take your hand, shoot a little roll cast at it. So if I shoot a little roll cast and pick it up, that fly, I've got flies here right here. So that fly's floating along. If you just kind of rip that off and your fly, it's going to sink it and then pull it out. Now it's soaked, CDC, shitty. You can't sink your fly when it's CDC. So when it's floating around like this, if I do a roll pickup, I shoot, it's hard to, so I shoot just kind of like a little flick of a roll. So what it'll do, and then when you pick up, so it just goes like this, it pulls the fly right up. Okay. And then you make your cast. So it also, when you do that, it makes a little snap, shoots the water off of it. And when you're in calm water, you still want to do it because most of the time people spook the fish. And what they do is by, in fast water, you can do your faster pickups, but in slower water, smoothly picking it up and shooting that, you don't want to stream the fly off because, fish are paranoid about death from above, mainly shadows. Like I take people to the river all the time. The first thing they do is walk right over stand at the edge of the river, holding their rod over the river. So they just put a shadow across the river, all the trout leave, and then we go somewhere else. But also if you're a fish and you're looking up and you see spray and that peel off, it's no good. So the book behind me, a guy named Jeremy Lucas, he's like a big deal in England. He calls it leader to hand. He dry fly fishes with no fly line. Like, so he just uses a very long leader that tapers down. He's a dry fly specialist over there. He feels that is the ticket because you were spooking so many fish with your fly line coming off. I think the Spanish have it better, and the French, they just fish long leaders. Doesn't mean you have to go to an 18-foot leader, but the more you get a bit more length. I also fish a 2-weight line off a 4-weight rod. The reason I do that is the thinner the diameter fly line doesn't drag as much. It also lands, not only does it land softly, it comes off the line, but you'll be amazed at how much drag you get with a 5-weight fly line versus a 4 versus a 3, or a 6. So there's value in using all of them, but I was always focused on, it's how softly it lands. We all think, a 4-weight lands so soft. I think it's actually better because it's how you lift it off. It doesn't catch as much water. But if it's high floating, it's even better. So that's a very long answer to say grease up your fly line.
Okay. and you're using like nylon, not fluorocarbon for your dry fly leaders.
Yeah, or co-polymer.
Co-polymer.
And that just has a little bit more floatability. It's more supple. The other mistake people make in dry fly fishing is, and then there's one FFF guy on here, but I hate this approach. They do this wiggle cast, like they cast and wiggle it. Don't ever do that, ever. If I do that, I'll cut your fly line off. I'll take it away. You're done if you do a wiggle cast. So the problem with the wiggle cast is you're shooting the line and you're straightening the leader and you're wiggling the fly line. The drag is caused by eating up where you want the slack is between your fly line and the dry fly. So wrap your head around the more slack you can put in. How do you put in more slack? Long, thin tippets. So if you're using, okay, you've got a 7-foot tapered leader or something like that. 4 feet of line versus 10 feet of, I'll be exaggerate, you're going to get way more wiggles the longer the tippet. The thinner the tippet, the more wiggles you get. So, you know, thin, long tippet will reduce your drag tenfold. And you can actually, if you just make your cast and drop your arm, or push your thumb up, or make an open loop and pull it down, that'll fall in all these little, you know, scraggly loops. It takes a lot for the current to pull that all apart. You don't have to mend. I never mend when I'm dry fly. Like one mend maximum. Like, you know, you fire that in, put slack into the leader, spend more time on how dense is my dry fly. I use CDC, so it doesn't catch a lot of wind, so I can use very long. If you're using hare's ear, not hare's ear, elk hair, they're great dry flies. Elk hair, caddis is great. All stimulators are great. They catch a lot of wind. So you may have to shorten the problem I have to go shorter on my leader because it blows back on me. And then I'm always trying to straighten it out. So one reason I like CDC is it cuts through the wind, but I can use very long, thin tippets. So if you start messing around with that conceptually, you'll find your dry fly. You won't sink them either because you've got that floating over here, nice and long, doing that roll pickup, and your dry fly fishing will go through the roof. You'll slay them. Like,
despite having what you've said about dry flies, you find you get a lot of hits at the end as it goes under, as the dry fly sinks on the.
Sometimes, sometimes. And there is a fly that we take the CDC and pull it back, and you can actually, as it swings around, you can swing them and kind of do a hard mend and pull it so it bounces back up. You can do that with this fly, this championship caddis. This guy, you actually swing it like a wet when they're doing that. And then what I would do is, so I like crazy frog fanning it, hard mend, it'll go boop, and then you go boop, and then they'll sometimes that's the ticket. Yep. But you also get it skating it too, right? As well. I have no trouble under control trying to move a fly too. Like, don't take the fly, try wiggling it, try that. But I find to get most on the long cast on a dead drift myself on most of these. They usually take it early in the cast, I
find. Just a question for you, Ian. I just want to go to the tackle again.
Sure.
So what length rod are you using?
For which?
For if you're using the dry fly fishing.
Dry fly is 3/4. It's called 3/4 weight, 9'6". So I don't go as long. 9 foot. Between a 9 and a 10. I don't need the long, super long rod. You need a little power to cast, but it's that balance, you know, from a 3 weight to a 5 weight.
And what length leader are you normally using?
18 to 20 feet.
Wow.
So
those guys caught that. So even with the 9, it's a long leader.
So it's a 9. It tapers down to 9. I use Maxima Chameleon. It is a Spanish formula, and then I use. Yeah, it's about an 18. It's 19, and then I use 9 feet of 7 or 8X.
Yeah, so how much fly line is actually coming out?
I cast far, so I fish pretty far away. So that's a crappy setup if you're fishing close. So you need quite a bit of fly line to turn it over. But
you're going out there like 30 feet, 40 feet.
Yeah, it's distance, yep. So when I fish dries now, I don't wade in the river. I just stand and cast, and then I'll move up. Like it's because I don't want to spook them, but within reason. Like the farther you are away from a fish, the harder it is to land it. You get crap sets. It sucks. So using your feet is better. So just find your working distance. But I find 20 feet, whatever I also find that length that you know that sweet load in your rod. You always have that out. So at minimum. And not too much more than that. But there's there's times I cut that leader back because it's windy and it's annoying. There's tangles all over the place. I wouldn't say go to that. That's pretty extreme. But 12 to 14, I'd be trying to fish a 12 to 14 if I was, fishing. Like I said, and I'd continually try to lengthen the tippet until I start to get better at it.
So let me put it this way. You're taking out the average person who's an
Yeah.
okay caster, right? Not you. What length would you put on there?
I put 12 to 14 on it, and then I work them.
So you would go as
And then
far
by
as
the end of the day, 16 foot.
okay.
But it's also because the leader, and I've been sworn to secrecy on not saying how to actually. But if you write me, I'll send you some. But the form, like it sounds really impressive. It's the taper of the leader. But there are there's lots of tapered leaders that work well. But again, in that range, I mean, if you got Joe Humphreys was doing this in the 50s. He fished a 12 to 14 foot. He was obsessed with the taper, and he's got a great taper in the book behind me, Trout Tactics. George Harvey was an amazing dry fly fisherman. It's nothing they weren't doing, shooting the slack in. They did phenomenally well, and still Joe Humphrey still does today. No more than a 14-foot dry fly leader, but he's obsessed. I can tell you, having fished with him multiple times, he's obsessed with that wiggle going to the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Read his book, he'll talk about it the whole time. Like it's if you're not getting slack between the fly line and the fly, forget about it. That's the key. Like I wouldn't get hung up on the length, but too short is a pain in the ass. I'll tell you that much.
I guess we talked about a 4-weight for dry flies. What about if you're nymphing, or what kind of length of rod are you using? Are you still using a 4-weight?
So I rarely use a 4-weight. I usually use a 2-weight or a 3-weight myself. I've said I've had to pick one for your everyday. Like the 3-weight, I think 10's a little short, but 10 minimum, 10 to 11 foot. 11 foot's a little long, so maybe a 10 over an 11. I use a 10-foot 6 to be really difficult about the whole thing. But you know, one of those. A couple things though. Make sure you match your reel weight with your nymphing rod. What catches people is the length. So a lot of people buy ultra light reels and put them on these nymphing rods that are still light, but the physics of a pendulum, like you got the longer out here, it really wants to tip down on you. You don't want to have it in your hand. So find that where it will balance in your hand comfortably and be at a, you know, neutral balance, right where you like to hold it. Otherwise, you'll, like the number one thing I would say, you'll be fighting it the whole time. Because you either don't want, you don't want it to be trying to pull the tip down on you all the time. Because if you think about it, you're straining your muscles all the time to keep that up. So a well balanced, more than the line weight, like, or sorry, 2-weight, 3-weight, 4-weight, whatever. If they're not balanced, they all suck. If it's balanced, some of the European manufacturers are putting little discs you can put on the back to actually balance it. So that's how obsessed they are. But you know, if it balances well and you can hold it, you know, I fish a lot like here. That's me nymphing right here. I also like to put my finger on the blank. So for sensitivity. So, you know, you're not supposed to cast like this. It's supposed to be like this. When I'm fishing nymphing, I like this and then holding my finger on the blank. So I can feel, and I live over here, right? And really, you know, I'm obsessed with how make sure it's a very, very thin, these nymphing lines, make sure it's a really, really thin one. The thinner you can get, it's all about taking the weight out. But that soft rod will allow you the light tippets I talked about earlier to actually not break off fish, land them pretty quickly. It's the enabling of the light tippet is why you want the soft rod. 4-weight, you better be fishing big fish, and that's mainly just because you're gonna, to me, it's too stiff of a rod for a 7X tippet. Because I mean, I tell you, when you set a hook on those soft rods, you can't break the tippet if you try. It's like the float guys have been doing this for forever. Like those noodle rods, they put 6-pound on there and land steelhead all day long on that stuff. And that's a steelhead, right? So we're talking a lot of times brown trout, but I do have a pretty stiff, not stiff, but a pretty beefy 3-weight. And that's when I have to fish those big, fast rivers. I know there's big fish in there, and that's 100% about controlling the fish. But if I can get away with it, I'd fish a 2-weight on every river.
Going for the steelhead, you're mainly using streamers, I guess. You're not using these small flies.
No, I wouldn't say that. It's gonna sound crazy, but that pink bead hair's here. When that water's clear on the Bayfield, smaller when I have to throw when they've seen enough. If I showed you if I had steelhead yarn here, I'd show you my steelhead nymph. So I do fish really, really small egg patterns. When I say, so I fish the Maitland a lot, which is gin clear. They like nymphs on the Maitland. They also like, I take glow bug yarn, I wrap it on a hook, and I clip it about the size of a hook eye. That is my #1 pattern on the Maitland because it is so clear. Now I will, but when I swing flies, I'm really weird. I fish monsters like Kevin Feenstra patterns out of Michigan, like aquatic nuisance, thunder chickens, stuff like that. They're like a good double size of a Rapala. So when I swing, I go for the reaction bite. I don't get cute with it at all. I mean, John Volk will do great swinging little tiny stuff and does very, very well with it. I'll usually target nymphing on that stuff. But I do, if it's skinny water, I'll go to the Euro tactics. Otherwise, I have no trouble putting any of these nymphs under an indicator. But as I said before, I'll try to get away with as thin of a tippet as I can for the drift. The one thing I don't like about indicator fishing is that it's hinging like this. It's putting a lot of line through the water. So a little tip as your angle, like so if this is the top of the water, this is the bottom of the water, choose your favorite depth. You know, if my tippet is straight down, right, there's very limited tippet going through the water. If I come in at an angle like this, it's pushing through way more tippet to actually get to the bottom. So one thing when you're Euro nymphing or anything, you can change the angle by moving the rod. So if I am in shallow water, if I put the rod low to the water, everybody wants to high stick it. If I put the rod low to the water, my nymphs are going through. I'm pushing all this tippet through the water. It won't snag. As soon as I raise the rod, it hits the bottom. So what I like about the Euro rig, by just raising the rod up and down, I can make sure my fly is right on the bottom. With this hinge system, I don't know if it's on the bottom, the water on the top of the water is moving way faster, especially steelhead fishing. So it's already, the bobber's going this way. It's trying to pull my flies out of the water. I've had to overweight it. It's got all this slack in between it. I use it, but I feel I'm missing a lot of fish. I think you get hits a lot and it doesn't move the indicator. So I'll try to get away with a variation of what, call it a tight line system as much as I can, but I'm not naive to the fact, especially on drift boats and stuff like that, you got to throw the hinged rig. But when I do, I go light tippet because there's a lot going on and I want to go as short as I can so I don't have to put 1.5 length the bottom to get down. I hate that because people are saying you're going to cast all that slack because your bobber is going to be all the way here by the time it's going to start dragging your fly across the bottom. That's how you go through. All that tippet's getting pushed through the water on this angle. It's not going through the water like this. It's like that. And I can't stand it, but it works. I like it in slow water. I think a dry dropper and I think an indicator rig is the ticket when you have slow water with barely any current. It will actually be like this and cruise nicely and not sag the bottom. Fish will move up. There's not a lot of current. I really like those systems in slower water, not faster water.
You ever use a dropper behind a streamer?
Oh yeah, double streamer. Yeah, for sure. Yep. So I always put the heaviest fly on the point. So if I was to fish 2, I put this. I do a dropper though. I don't do New Zealand style where you put it off the end. I'll tie to this and put a dropper. Oh, like
18 inches or above.
You got tippet. You put I'll have a dropper.
Yep.
I'll show you my. You'll see me do this about 100. So if I want to put a dropper on something, I'll take the end of the line here. So that's the end. And just pick 5 feet, 1 foot, doesn't matter. So I just fold the line over. I make a little loop like that. So you can see that I made a little loop. Yep. I go once around the top, once around again, like that. Then I take this piece and go through and pull it. So what you end up with is this big kind of loop thing. I can just make a dropper wherever I want, and I get this perfect dropper. And the cool part about this would be if this breaks, I don't lose this fly ever. So a 3-turn water knot will do the same thing. But so I'll do a lot of tandem streamers but if I always the heaviest fly on the point. A lot of people with that heavy fly in front and a small thing behind it. I don't like that because it has a lot of slack in it. Not that it doesn't work. I just think you miss a lot of hits. For the other knot I use is a Davy Knot for all my flies. You seen the Davy Knot? If I say that one.
Go ahead, show us, please.
All right, Davy Knot, streamer. All right, so go through. This is hard to, like this. So all I've done is gone through the. You can also whoops, and then I pulled it out. All right, let's see how I can do this without. Cannot see. Okay. So go through. And I've gone through the hook guide, so it's like that. Just like you would start any normal knot, you just go behind. So I just take that, go behind. That is hard to show you guys. And in front, that's probably hard to show you. So I end up going once in behind. Oh, there we go. So I go round and it just once over the top and push through. So you end up with this little figure 8 thing. That's it. No trimming, never will slip. Strongest knot ever. It's no little, whoops, where's the camera? There it is. What I like is a really small knot. If you're fishing too, you can see it's a small knot. I land steelhead, salmon on it. It'll never, there's no friction on it. It's the money. So you can change a fly in about 10 seconds with that fly. So if you look up Davy Knot, that's the one I use. No?
Nope, I think you've done a grand job. It's been fantastic, Ian.
Oh, thanks. I've had a good time. Thanks for the questions and putting up with my basic flies. I'm glad you showed some interest in that. So I'll take the pictures, and as Brian, if you want to share my email, I welcome all questions, and I'm happy to share my. Again, this is just my opinion. I've stolen a lot from some of the best anglers in the world, so I pay it forward to you. The one question I get is, what do their fly boxes look like? Simple flies, almost all the same as what you have. They just spend a lot more time on how they're fishing them than what the fly is. 100%. I fished with 5 world champions, and they didn't have any flies that I didn't have. They're just really good at how they don't spook fish, and they present them very consistently.
I think we're kind of old-fashioned in starting off with the 5-weight rods. I think that's the problem. We've got these fast, accurate 5-weight rods, and we should have really started off with the 10-foot, 3-weight rods. I think that would.
And I find like when a lot of people when they come out with me and I show them, they start to really like it because it is it's light, it's fun, and it's technical, and you feel everything. It's pretty fun. Like.
Yep.
And I know Marco and his wife are hooked on it ever since they did the David Arcade thing, because I've met with them at the club, and they're Euro nymphing all the time now.
Yeah, they hired me. We did a day afterwards, and we did a full, like, he's like, bring it together for me. I mean, Marco's just been sending me stuff all the time, but he got it. Yeah, he's obsessed with it. So it's a bit of a rabbit hole. You got to make sure, like, 5-weights still have their purpose, all that stuff. But when you get good at it, it's a very effective way to catch fish. But it is also, I tell people, it's very subtle. It's not just this chuck and duck thing people think. That's kind of the old way with these heavy flies. It's light flies, actually casting and using very light rods and materials. So it's really fun in those smaller streams too.
Is it more historically, and I think you've told me this before, kind of a difference between what the Europeans do and what North Americans do? Like, we're stuck on those 9-foot rods, and they've been using the 10s, 11s, you know.
Yeah, they're constantly innovating for sure, but I think we've kind of all leveled it now. But they were very big on, and the only reason they're using the long rods is because it's a better angle to hold all the line off the water, and it's soft. But we've kind of caught up to them, at least in the competition part. I would say when I watch American videos, though, like of your average people teaching, they're still using pretty heavy stuff. Like I just watched an Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing, and I found they put those little tags on it to see. I hate that. It's too much weight. It catches wind. I don't like any of it. But I like thin for the win, we like to say. So the thinner, the better. So, all right, guys. Thanks for your time. And
thank you so much.
You'll invite me back sometime. I'm happy to do it in person someday down the road. It'd be great.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.